The Subcommittee for the Indigenous Peoples of the United States will now come to order. The Subcommittee is meeting today to hear testimony on a single bill, but a very important piece of legislation. It is H.R. 5444, the Truth and Healing Commission on Indian Boarding School Policies Act, introduced by Representative Teresa Davids of Kansas. Under Committee Rule 4F, any oral opening statements at hearings are limited to the chair and the ranking minority member or their designees. This will allow us to hear from our witnesses sooner and help members keep to their schedules. Therefore, I ask unanimous consent that all other members' opening statements be made part of the hearing record if they are submitted to the clerk by 5 p.m. today or the close of the hearing, whichever comes first. Hearing no objection, so ordered. Without objection, the chair may also declare a recess subject to the call of the chair. Hearing no objection, so ordered. And I want to note that we will be having votes later on, so I might need to call that witnesses at that break, and I thank everybody for their patience. As described in the notice statements, documents or motions must be submitted to the electronic repository at HNRC docs at mail.house.gov. Members physically present should provide a hard copy for staff to distribute by email. Please note that members are responsible for their own microphones. As with our fully in-person meetings, members can be muted by staff only to avoid inadvertent background noise. Finally, members or witnesses experiencing technical problems should inform committee staff immediately. I also ask unanimous consent that Representative Teresa Davids of Kansas have permission to sit on the dais and participate in the hearing. Hearing no objection, so ordered. I will begin by recognizing myself for my opening statement. Good afternoon. Today, we are dedicating our full hearing and attention to H.R. 5444, the Truth and Healing Commission on Indian Boarding Schools Act. This bill is imperative to recognize the atrocities of the federal government's Indian boarding school policies. It is critical to provide a voice to survivors, their family members, and tribal nations. It is necessary for us all to better understand this dark history so that we can grow and heal from it. Along with this bill, I'm very proud of the work that my Hermana Secretary Deb Holland and the Department of Interior are taking to begin to address this issue. With that, I will turn over the remainder of my time for opening statement to Representative Teresa Davids, who is the sponsor of this legislation and an incredible leader on this issue as one of the first Native American women in Congress. Representative Davids.
Thank you, Chairwoman Fernández, and also to Ranking Member Westerman for holding this hearing today. I appreciate the opportunity to provide brief remarks in support of my bill, H.R. 5444, the Truth and Healing Commission on Indian Boarding School Policies Act of 2021. I am a proud member of the Ho-Chunk Nation of Wisconsin. My mom is Crystal Herridge. My grandparents are Ruth Stacy and Lawrence Little George, who are both survivors of boarding schools. And I am honored to be one of the first 2 Native American women ever elected to Congress. I would not be here today were it not for the resilience of my ancestors and those who came before me. The policies and assimilation practices of the United States had the sole purpose of culturally assimilating American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian children in residential boarding schools across the country. Children were coerced and compelled to attend boarding schools away from their home. Many children did not return to their families or their communities. Those that did return lost generations worth of cultural knowledge, stories, and traditions, and communities lost their language keepers, cultural practitioners, and future leaders. As the co-chair of the Congressional Native American Caucus, I work with other Native members and our colleagues to ensure that the needs of tribal nations and communities are prioritized and that our voices are included in discussions when developing legislation. That's why I worked with Native American Caucus co-chair Tom Cole to introduce H.R. 5444 and to work across the aisle to gather bipartisan support. This legislation will establish a formal commission in the United States to investigate and document the attempted termination of cultures and languages of Indigenous peoples and assimilation practices that occurred against Native people through U.S. Indian boarding school policies. This investigation will be documented through culturally respectful and meaningful public hearings, and the Commission will receive guidance from a Truth and Healing Advisory Board to develop recommendations for the federal government in a final report due no later than 5 years after enactment. This legislation builds on the important work being done at the Department of Interior. We saw yesterday in Volume 1 of their Federal Boarding School Initiative report that the separation of Native children and families in the name of civilized assimilation caused significant impacts. This bill does not duplicate the efforts of the Department of Interior, but rather expands and continues to acknowledge that legacy with the help of survivors, tribal leaders, policy experts, and communities that can help guide this process. And I'm sure you will learn more from our witnesses today. The impacts of boarding school policies have touched all Native peoples, both past and present. I'd like to acknowledge how painful and uncomfortable these and future conversations are going to be. I honor and thank the witnesses and survivors who are here today, who are brave enough to inform my colleagues about the impacts that boarding school policies have had on their lives and their communities. There were 14 federal Indian boarding schools in Kansas. One sits in the Kansas 3rd and is the Shawnee Indian Manual Labor School, located in Fairway, Kansas. It's now preserved as the Shawnee Indian Mission State Historic Site, according to the Kansas State Historical Society. It operated from 1838 to 1862, and at one time had nearly 200 children there. And in Lawrence, Kansas, Haskell Indian Industrial Training School was one of the largest early boarding schools in the country. While I was fortunate to attend what is now Haskell Indian Nations University, there still resides a history that must not be forgotten. The campus includes known grave sites of over 100 Native children who died at the school when it was implementing its assimilationist practices. This commission will build off Secretary Holland's federal boarding school initiative by collecting documents and testimony outside the federal boarding school system. The Department of Interior's efforts, along with the bipartisan support of this bill, shows that the branches of federal government are ready to work toward fully acknowledging its contribution to this history. As federal partners, we owe the Native children and lost relatives of the time the resources to investigate and fully understand how we got here. Establishing a Truth and Healing Commission will bring survivors, experts, federal partners, and tribal leaders to the table to continue this investigation and develop a culturally respectful healing process. If Native children were able to endure and survive the Indian boarding school era in our nation, we should be able to find it in ourselves to fully investigate what happened to our relatives and work toward a brighter path for the next 7 generations. Thank you again to Chairwoman Fernández and Ranking Member Westerman for calling this hearing today, and I'm looking forward to working with the subcommittee and with my colleagues. I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Davis. This will be, I believe, a very powerful hearing that we hear today from all witnesses. I would now like to recognize Acting Ranking Member Obernolte for his opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to you and to the author for bringing this bill forward and for convening this hearing on a very important topic. The events that catalyze the need for a hearing like this are nothing short of horrific. And I think if you look at the report that was just issued yesterday by the Department of Interior, it seems very clear that the harm that was done to Native American tribes was unfortunately inflicted deliberately with the goal of not only forcing cultural assimilation, but also of achieving territorial dispossession. So I expect that we are going to hear some horrifying things in this hearing, and rightfully so. And I also, I really like the title of this bill, because I think this is what we're all after, the Truth and Healing Commission. We need to achieve both of those things, to not only right the wrongs of the past, but to try to achieve some kind of healing so that we can emerge together as one society, which I think is the goal of everyone in this room. I would like to add some respectful suggestions both to the author and to the chair, because I would like to see this legislation be bipartisan, and I think it deserves to be. One of the things that I hope we're going to have a discussion about today is whether or not this commission should have subpoena authority. As I'm sure most in the room are aware, it's not the norm for a commission like this to have subpoena authority. In fact, there are standing committees here in the House of Representatives that don't even have subpoena authority. So I understand the goal of having subpoena authority. I mean, we are the Truth and Healing Commission. So, however, I'd like everyone to think about the fact that assuming that this is going to be an adversarial relationship with the people that testify for the commission might be doing a disservice to the goals of the commission. So subpoena authority, while it might serve the goal of truth, might be adversarial to the goal of healing. And I think that we should have that discussion because I'm not sure that that serves the purpose of the commission. I also think we need to be very clear about the taxpayer resources that are being expended here, and appropriately so. I think we need to have a discussion about whether or not service on the commission should be compensated. As the bill is written right now, it's compensated at level 4 of the executive schedule, which is almost $200,000 a year. I would hope that it would be more of a community service role. I think we should have that discussion. And I also think we need to talk about the total costs of the bill. I'm not opposed to investing substantial taxpayer resources in this commission, but I think we need to be explicit about what those resources are. And right now, at the end of the bill, it merely says that the necessary resources, such sums as may be necessary, will remain available until expended. So I think we need to quantify exactly what those sums are and write it in the bill so that everyone is clear on that, and so that it would withstand challenge in the future. So those are just a couple of respectful suggestions, Madam Chair, but I am very much looking forward to the testimony today. It is a very difficult topic for all of us, but I am very supportive of the goal of achieving both truth and healing here, and looking forward to our time together. I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Robel-Nolte. Now I will transition to our panel of witnesses for today. Before introducing them, I will remind our witnesses that they are encouraged to participate in a witness diversity survey created by the Congressional Office of Diversity and Inclusion. Witnesses may refer to their hearing invitation materials for further information. Under our committee rules, oral statements are limited to 5 minutes, but you may submit a longer statement for the record if you choose, and I would simply note that we have received your statements and we have read them. Thank you for the written statements that you've already sent us. When you begin, the on-screen timer will begin counting down and it will turn orange when you have 1 minute remaining. I recommend that members and witnesses joining remotely lock the timer on their screen. When you go over the allotted time, I will tap my gavel and kindly ask you to please wrap up your statement. After your testimony is complete, please remember to mute yourself to avoid any inadvertent background noise. I will allow the entire panel to testify before we begin the question portion of the witnesses. Now, as we've noted, we are asking for testimony from survivors and those who have firsthand knowledge of a very difficult and dark period of our history. Before I introduce our first witness, I want to advise members, viewers, and listeners that some of the testimony we are about to hear today may be graphic and disturbing. We are simply noting that so that everyone tuning in and listening will be aware of such possibility. The chair now recognizes Mr. James LaBelle, Sr., who is the first Vice President of the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition and a boarding school survivor. Mr. James LaBelle, you are recognized for 5 minutes.